Good morning, besties. So sorry I'm late to my own stream. Had to do a little. I was just running late, okay? Sorry about it. But hi, happy eclipsing. We made it. Well, we haven't made it officially just yet. The eclipse is not until later this evening, but we made it to Sunday. We made it through the Mars Jupiter square, which was filthy. And the energy leading up to this eclipse has also been filthy. So I'm very happy to move on to the other side of it and to see what comes up next. So let me say hello to the homies in the chat. Hi, April. Good morning. Good afternoon. Hi, Carrington. Good morning. Good afternoon to you. Hello to Dr. Deb. Happy Sunday. Good morning to you on the East Coast. And hello. Didn't even realize the Mars Jupiter square was Friday. It was indeed on Friday. Hi, Laura. Good morning, good afternoon. Yes, it has been a week, but we're here now. I'm going to pull some cards today. I actually have a lot on my agenda that I did not intentionally plan before a few minutes ago, but then you know what happens. All the downloads come through at the same time, and anything that I needed to see before I came on live, apparently I saw. So I have a few bodies of work, I guess, that I want to share today. I didn't do any strictly astro notes because we've been doing a lot of like technical astro forward conversation the last couple of weeks. So today I want to do a bit more personal sharing, as well as just kind of talk through some technical astro things, mostly related to the nodes, because I feel like that's something that my work in general has been lacking, but something that I'm personally interested in right now. And I also want to share a little bit from Madison, Sidereal Maven's post on Patreon for today's eclipse. If you follow Madison and you haven't read the eclipse post, please do that after this live. And I want to share from a post that I literally just saw before I got on Instagram that I think speaks really directly to the moment that we're in with this eclipse, at least from my psychological perspective. So exciting times. For those who don't know, today's eclipse is an eclipse because the moon is in Aquarius opposite the sun and Mercury in Leo. And eclipses happen astrologically whenever the moon and the sun do their little full moon, new moon dance within orb or within a certain amount of degrees of the north and south node. So today's eclipse is relatively conjunct the north node, also known as Rahu, which is in Aquarius. And so I want to talk about Rahu and a little bit and tell a little bit of the story of the nodes. So I'm going to start there, and then I will do my best to be organized in my thoughts, but I am coming off of a very potent microdose that I did yesterday, which I will also be talking about at some point. So do my best to do some storytelling today. Hopefully you guys stick with me, and then we will finish, or I will throw some cards in there at some point whenever it feels intuitively correct to do so. So I'm finally feeling the culmination of the Virgo Pisces eclipses. Yeah, the fact that we still have one more Virgo eclipse, at first it didn't make sense to me, but now that everything is unfolding the way that it is, I'm like, it actually makes a lot of sense to end the Virgo Pisces eclipse cycle with having had a Leo and an Aquarius eclipse in between. So, yeah, very curious times that we're in. So, let's start with the nodes and just a little bit of history of the nodes. So, from a Vedic perspective, I love the Vedic perspective of the North and South nodes, Rahu and Ketu, because they make more sense to me than anything the tropicals say. Sorry, no shade to the tropicals, but as a sidereal astrologer, a lot of the Vedic stuff just aligns a little bit better to me. So, a brief history of the story or the mythology of the North and South node. I am reading this from northernlightsvedic.com. Not like a preferred source or anything, just the source that I happened to land on this morning that also talks about Rahu in Vedic astrology. So, using this as an example, but we'll try to interject my own thoughts of how I feel about the north and the south nodes. So, first off, technically speaking, Rahu and K2, the north and the south node, they represent points in the orbital paths between the sun and the moon that intersect. So the north node is where the orbits of the sun and the well, it really, I guess it's the sun doesn't orbit. The north node represents where the moon and the earth's orbits kind of intersect in the northern hemisphere. And then the south node is where those orbits intersect in the southern hemisphere. So technically speaking, that's why we have the north and the south node and why they are called the north and south nodes. Um they are known as one of the 9 traditional planets in Vedic astrology, but they are thought of as shadow points or shadow planets. So they're not physical entities that you can see with your eye in the sky. They are mathematical points, and they represent these kind of darker, shadowy aspects, karmic aspects, maybe less conscious parts of the self, whereas all of the planets are more visible and material representations of human consciousness and psychology, right? Um the story of the north and south nodes, if you haven't heard this before, I feel like it made the nodes make a lot of sense to me. But I'll just read this excerpt real quick so I keep the story straight. According to Vedic mythology, there was a demon serpent named Nagavasuki who rules the underworld. The demons and the gods were fighting a war for control of the universe, and then Nagavasuki decided that he would help the gods find the nectar of immortality, which, known in Sanskrit, is the Amrita, or the Amrita. The great serpent's body was used as an instrument for churning the ocean where the nectar was hidden, and when the gods found the Amrita, they wanted to keep the nectar away from the demons. However, Nagavasuki secretly drank from the nectar of immortality. Lord Vishnu, the creator of the universe, became very angry when he discovered this and threw a disc at Nagavasuki, which as a result separated his head from his tail. And because he already drank the nectar, he continued to live and continued to be immortal. So the head of this serpent that was split in two, Nagavasuki, became Rahu, and then his tail became known as Ketu. So because they're immortal, the Lord Vishnu needed to find somewhere for this demon head and tail to exist, which ended up being the north and the south node points. And because the north and the south node represent the relationship between the sun, the moon, and the earth, which is like the mind, the body, and the spirit, I believe. That's why these are known as very karmically potent aspects of self and shadowy aspects of self. Their energies are very different, and so they're not necessarily compatible with each other, but they are two sides of the same coin, I would say, as all oppositions are, that need to be reconciled and kind of brought into right relationship with each other. We have to balance them out in ourselves, and we have to work towards their reintegration. And then as you kind of read more into the nodes and just different people's perspective of the nodes, there's a lot of like past and present life type stuff that's tied up in the nodes as well. Usually the south node is making up for things in the past or reconciling things from a past life, or if you don't believe in past lives, maybe things from childhood or unconscious experiences from childhood. And then the north node is what we're going to talk about today. So, Rahu in astrology, it governs that which is foreign and different from the norm and represents maybe the outcast, and a person strongly influenced by Rahu might feel like an outsider. Rahu is ambitious and may be fighting for success and acceptance in the material world. So Rahu is a little bit more material. If you've heard people describe the North Node as where we're going, where we're headed, that's one way to look at it. A different way that I've heard it looked at is more like this insatiable desire or the new and uncomfortable and kind of unpredictable experiences in life that maybe sometimes we struggle to fulfill the destiny of that placement because it is new and unfamiliar. And both of the nodes in general are chaos agents. They are considered to be malefics, which is why um you hear a lot of commentary about like maybe not doing spell work on eclipses, or maybe leaving spell work to more advanced practitioners, or having a lot of guidance or a lot of something before you do spell work um on eclipses, because they are malefics. They are kind of trickster energy. They can represent illusions and delusions, and just sometimes what it looks like is not what it actually is with the nodes. So you have to be careful when working with them, but it doesn't mean that they can't be worked with at all. I think for Rahu, um whenever we talk about this like insatiable desire, like it is something that can represent desire, especially in humans, but it can also represent like, again, being insatiable in the way that it's never going to bring you satisfaction. Things that deal with the north node, we might feel compelled to do these things, or we might feel a bit obsessed or enthralled, but it's never going to bring satisfaction. um it's it's never going to bring us lasting fulfillment. So when Rahu needs attention, we do have to face the things that it stirs up in us. And we have to actually confront the things that come up whenever we're dealing with Rahuvian energy. But the purpose is to, um, again, bring us into integration and alignment with our south nodes. So that can be in real time, that can be in your personal natal chart. And then maybe one day I'll design a reading around that if I can get enough information about it. Hey, Madison. So, let me read this other post that I saw about the nodes too. Um, so nodes and eclipses can also bring up a lot of confusion and misunderstanding of our true nature. And that misunderstanding allows us to exist under this illusion that we are separate from the universal law of creation, which basically just means that how we each want to see ourselves, the way that we'd like to see ourselves as humans, maybe is not totally in alignment with who we actually are. I think that's just very true of people in general. And so the nodes have this ability to, again, stir up these unconscious things, or these things that we maybe have not particularly dealt with. Or sometimes the nodes have this way of just like inserting themselves into our lives and then putting us on a different path so that we move towards that integration process by stirring everything up. Because again, that insatiable desire, I think, of Rahu, and even the ways that we can feel kind of settled in K2 in our south node stuff, can make us stagnate sometimes. And so eclipses do the work of being like, okay, time for some unrest, time for you to get moving, you need to go in a different direction. Is this a correct direction? Not necessarily, but it's just kind of like stir all this stuff up, put a whole bunch of stuff on the table, you deal with it, because otherwise you probably would just continue to go in a particular direction that may not be fully in fulfillment and in alignment with you. So, Rahu usually represents inexperience and the things that we need to learn and again come into right relationship, and the confusion around inexperience and learning new things, whereas K2 can represent um things that we've already learned and the confusion of certainty, as I've heard it put. So the things that you think that you know and that you already understand, um better to always have a sense of curiosity rather than this sense of certainty, so that whenever things are stirred up and tossed around and displayed in a way that looks unfamiliar to you, you are not immediately thrown off your center. You're like, okay, cool, let's move forward and evolve in the ways that we're supposed to. So yeah, Rahu's domain is the confusion of ignorance, whereas K2 is the confusion of certainty. And the whole point of all of this is to bring the head and the tail of Rahu and Ketu together in some kind of integration, so that we become the people that we're meant to be in this life. So that's different for everyone depending on where they are in your chart. But then as a collective, the collective experience, I think, is it evolves and progresses forward depending on where the nodes are in real time, which right now are in Leo and Aquarius. Again, North Node being where Aquarius is, and South Node being in Leo. Cool. So, what do I want to talk about next? I've kind of decided that personally, the way eclipses are set up, I just assume at this point that they are going to propel you into some other direction. You can think about that as esoterically as you'd like. It can just be a fork in the road, and then you're being tasked with choosing some direction. You might choose your personal south node direction and stick with what you already kind of know and then deal with the consequences of that, or you might choose the unfamiliar or the uncertain and go in a direction where you don't know and deal with the consequences of that. But no matter which direction you choose, which event happens that sends you in whatever direction, your task is still going to be to balance out those nodal energies within yourself and using the stuff that exists in real time. Um, and so if you're going to do any magic, this is just my humble opinion. Please get a second opinion. But if you plan on doing any kind of spiritual works or spiritual magics, I would recommend doing cleansing type workings on leading up to or on the day of the eclipse. That way, whenever you move in whichever direction you're inevitably going to move into, you've released a lot of things from this timeline or this karmic line or whatever it is, so that you're moving with fresh energy into the next place. I wouldn't necessarily try to bring anything in or manifest anything before an eclipse or on the day of the eclipse, because it just, to me, it just feels like, again, that upheaval and this kind of regurgitation of so many different karmic and universal things all at once, that I just feel like personally, intuitively, the work will get lost in all of that if you try to plant seeds and manifest something during an eclipse. So I would focus on cleansing, fasting, removing things, moving into and during an eclipse, and then letting it go out into the cosmos, if you will, into the universe. And then after a couple of days, then plant your seeds, whatever things you need to do after that energy has passed. And I would say maybe the moon has moved out of the sign that it just got eclipsed in. But again, get a second opinion, consult with your own spirits, your own divinity, and do what feels right to you. Water break. And if you just joined, hello, please like the video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Okay, now I want to talk about Madison's post, because I just feel like I read it this morning after having the week that I had, and I was like, wow, this really speaks to exactly what was going on, and I didn't have the language for it. And as a fellow Aquarian with Saturn in Aquarius, um, it definitely spoke to a lot of my experience as an Aquarius. So focusing a lot on Aquarius today. There is one particular passage, because obviously I want you all to go subscribe to Madison's Sidereal Maven's Patreon so that you can read it for yourself. But there were a couple of passages that just really, I think, spoke to the experience that I was having. So, we all talked about over the last couple of weeks how a lot of this Leo stuff with the sun being in Leo feels like being in the spotlight, being centered in other people's attention, or just having a light shined on you, and then all of the feelings of self-awareness, but also expectation and pressure that come with that. And wanting to be seen a certain way, or wanting to be validated for who we are, just wanting who we actually are to be seen and witnessed by somebody else. But then the contrasting element to Leo is Aquarius, ruled by Saturn, which has a lot more to do with things that aren't seen, like the unseen, the conceptual, the intellectual, the mental, and how we feel on the inside in our self-concept stuff. And so we kind of talked about how having the moon in Aquarius is a little awkward for the moon itself, because the moon would like to be I think in a lot of ways, the moon and Cancer would like to be seen and known and understood without necessarily having to use words or without necessarily having to say explicitly what it needs. I think the moon wants to just be able to cry as a baby does, and somebody be able to attune to the sound and the quality and the texture of their tears and know exactly what they need. Like, I do really believe the moon itself and the sign Cancer as its domain want to be known and understood without really having to advocate for themselves. No shade, but just they want to be attuned to in a way that they shouldn't have to tell you. You should just know. And the reality is, we don't know. Sometimes we don't know what we need. So if we don't know what we need, how do we know what somebody else needs? And especially when it comes to babies, like, you have to learn. You have to learn a baby's needs because the baby can't tell you. So I think that just kind of exists in all of us. And then to put the moon in a position where, a sign like Aquarius that already feels and deals with being unseen and misunderstood and unknown, like, to then have the moon in that position is like, why even bother? Why should I say anything? Nobody's going to know what I'm talking about anyway. I don't even have the words to describe how I feel and what I think. So instead, I'm going to not even try, or I'm just going to keep that to myself, or it's all just going to remain hidden. I'm going to kind of like push it away or run away from it. Um, and that likely comes from a lot of experiences of nobody else having the interest or the curiosity or the desire to learn. And that can be for a number of reasons, but a lot of times it is related to identity, and identity can take on a bunch of different forms. So, that being said, let me find the paragraph that I wanted to reference. So, in this post, Madison is also talking about the opposition between the sun and the moon right now, where the sun in Leo, has a sense of pride about who they are and what they know about themselves and taking ownership of that and letting it be seen. Whereas the moon in Aquarius is kind of like, oh, I don't know if I want to do all that. That feels really intimidating and would rather just like not deal with it. But then the reality of that is, um, not letting your hidden feelings and your sense of identity being known means that nobody else is going to know who you are, and therefore nobody else can show up for you, and therefore um you don't receive the respect that you deserve as a person. And so what Madison wrote was that sometimes the judgment that we receive, knowing that fixed signs are about shame, is not because who we are is inherently wrong or unacceptable, but because we don't have the courage or the self-respect to own it. When you refuse to give yourself the respect that you deserve, it tells other people that they don't have to respect you either. Right? And I was like, oh, direct hit. Because it's true. I think, again, if we talk about Aquarius and the experience of being dismissed, that is disrespect. So it's like, if your whole life you've had your feelings, your needs, your desires, your wants, or your cries even minimized and dismissed and not taken seriously, why would you take your own feelings seriously? Why would you even acknowledge them in the first place as something that deserves to take up space in your own body, let alone let somebody else then be affected by you? That's just not that's just not what that is. And so I don't want to reveal the conclusion to this post, but um there was one other line that I thought was really relevant to self-abandonment when we talk about fixed signs, and that was that this last paragraph, I'll just read this last paragraph that says, what the moon in Aquarius is truly being asked is to drop the masks and let themselves be known, or to get burned by the weight of the wands, which is relevant to the cards that they pulled for this post. Release your detachment and let yourself feel the strength of your emotions. Stop playing it cool and let the peasants cringe at your unabashed passion. After all, you are the king or the queen or the ruler of your own world, are you not? You make the rules for your life. Otherwise, the thing you will end up dropping is yourself. Uh, So that leads me into story time, personal story time. This past week kicked my ass. I don't know about you guys. It sounds like you guys in here also feel the same way. Also, thank you for the compliment. I love a good pink tank top. It's also a very gay tank top. um, yeah. Leo and Aquarius stuff is so existential, but it's real as hell. Yes, friend, you did write this. And I was reading all of it and reflecting on my week like, damn, that's exactly what happened. And not just once, but several times over and over again. So, yeah. So, as I revealed last week, I have entered a new relationship dynamic that does not have a full title just yet. And we're both okay with that. And, I'm post Saturn return, right? I just had my Saturn return in Aquarius the last 3 years. And now we have these eclipses in Leo and Aquarius. And I just knew that they were going to bring up Saturn return stuff to fully be dealt with and to fully like be confronted and put into practice instead of just sitting in the self-reflection of it like we did for the last couple of months. And being in a new relationship, like I kind of saw this in my solar return. My solar return, I have Aquarius rising with Saturn conjunct Venus, and I'm in a 7th house year. So Saturn conjunct Venus, literally talking about like when I saw that placement in the 1st house of my solar return, I thought, okay, so this is literally about self-determination in relationships and creating the types of relationships, whether those are romantic or friendly or otherwise, that actually align with how I see myself and that align with my ideas and ideals for relationships. And a lot of that, I think for me personally, having Venus in Scorpio has always meant that whatever relationship dynamic that I'm going to be in or relationship dynamics that I'll be in are going to be non-traditional or untraditional relationship types. So um I am in my first official polyamorous dynamic where the person that I'm seeing has a long-term boyfriend of several years. And I did get her permission to talk about this before talking about it. So without revealing too much, yeah, I'm like kind of in this position where I've decided, okay, I'm like kind of a lover. We were friends first, getting to know each other over the last few months, and then kind of tripped into a romantic dynamic. And because of the nature of the relationship having multiple partners involved, it's like immediately challenged me in the ways that a lot of us have discussed and that a lot of us have heard about on the internet, where you have to communicate so much more. I mean, I think you should communicate. Yeah, I think you should, and a lot of times you should over communicate, but I think you should communicate a lot in monogamous relationships too. But it's just, I think because there is no true popular reference point for what polyamorous or just other non-traditional relationship structures look like, you really do have to create your own rules. And so that feels very Aquarius to me. I do think non-traditional relationships are gaining more popularity. But yeah, so I've always wanted to try polyamory. I've always microdosed polyamory throughout my life ever since I was really young and would pretend to have multiple wives. But I've never actually been in one in practice. So just being in that dynamic has already made me have to get really intimate with myself and like really honest with myself in a way that I have not done in relationships previously. And I'm not coming on here to say this as like, this is the way that you should do things. This is just an experience that I'm having that feels astrologically relevant. um, so, it starts out all fun and games the first 2 weeks, and then we start coming up on some of our first just minor, like the minorest of minor conflicts. And the challenge for me as someone who has often shrunk myself emotionally in relationships by literally being what Madison said, calm, cool, and collected. Mr. Capricorn always has it together. Things don't bother him. Things just kind of roll off. He plays it cool, whatever. Like, That's usually been how I've moved through relationships because for whatever reason I often prioritize the other person's feelings, or I just let my empathy and care for the other person get the best of me, and so I'll often put myself in the position of maybe something I did was wrong, or maybe I understood something the wrong way, or maybe it's me and I'm making a big deal out of something that shouldn't be a big deal, because one narrative that I have for myself, from my upbringing, is that I do worry a lot. I'm very anxious, and I try to have control over things that maybe are just outside of my control, and it's hard for me to contend with that. So a lot of relationship school was me learning this about myself during my Saturn return and trying to find the balance between being empathetic and also holding my own and like kind of standing my ground, not from a defensive place, but from a place of this is the experience I'm having, and I would like for that to be considered and acknowledged in this dynamic. That seems like something that should just be a given in relationships, but it's extremely difficult for me to take up space in that way because I don't know, it's just hard to take my own feelings at face value and take them seriously in a way that is like neutral. And I guess coming from a long history of hurt and pain. And so through each small thing that came up during the week, some of those which did involve her other partner in a roundabout way, or some of which just involved like us with each other, I had to actually acknowledge the fact that a feeling was coming up for me just with myself first and be like, wow, that's so uncomfortable that I'm having this feeling right now. And clearly, this feeling is trying to tell me something. And it doesn't have to be like the end of the world. It doesn't have to be catastrophic. It doesn't have to be a statement about me or about her, but it just is a thing that's coming up that if I were to let this slide like I normally do, I'm going to start building up a resentment bank. And we haven't even been doing this very long. So I did end up making a conscious choice to say, okay, I have to talk about this. Now, what actually happens in real time for me, and tell me if you can relate, is that when a feeling comes up for me of any kind in any situation, my first response to that feeling is to freeze. It just feels like, and I made the joke about dogs whenever you put those little booties on their feet so that they don't burn their feet on the pavement. How sometimes you put those booties on their feet and then they just like freeze and they feel like they can't move even though there's literally nothing wrong. In fact, they're more safe. This is meant to protect you, but you're stuck and you can't move and you don't know why. Things are happening. So I would just feel like that. And a lot of times I would like my throat would kind of close up on me and I would just feel like even if I wanted to describe what was happening inside, there were too many different things to parse out, and I didn't really have language for all of the things that would come up at once because there were a lot of like conflicting unrelated feelings at times. And so um having that happen in real time, and a lot of times it happening in front of I'm trying to think of how what do I call her? For I think just for easy purposes I'm just going to call her my partner. Just going to be what it is. But for that to happen in front of the person that I'm seeing, and to be like, and for her to know that my energy has now shifted in a way that is visible and obvious, because hi, I'm a Scorpio and a first house moon, was like, okay, I'm in the spotlight. Like clearly how I'm feeling right now, even if I wanted to act like wasn't happening, it's very obvious that something's going on beneath the surface. I have two options. I can withhold that and keep it to myself, or pretend it's not there and dissociate from it like I've always done, or I can find some way to just say, I feel weird. And I think both of us kind of landed on, I feel weird right now, and I don't really know how to talk about it. And I think just doing that was so brand new to me that then almost immediately so many other feelings would come up of like, oh, they're like all the feelings are like, oh, I have permission to be here. Cool. I want to take a seat as well. And now I just got a whole bunch of conflicting voices and previous life experiences and previous relationship experiences and all of these things coming to hang out in the room. Now, I know I've mentioned before that Leo and Leo transits can sometimes feel like other people's voices in your head coming up. and telling you who you are and what you should do or how you're being or whatever. And a lot of times, this is exactly what was happening to me. I would be fighting, I call them ghosts of girlfriends past in my head that all have different opinions and things that I've held on to or that I've internalized in my last several relationships that tell me, hey, whatever you're feeling right now sucks. Keep that to yourself. Or whatever you're feeling right now isn't allowed here. And whether they did that on purpose or not is besides the point. But it was just literally like, okay, shit. I'm because of all the work that I've done, right? I'm realizing that there are a lot of voices in my head right now, a lot of past experiences that are trying to make themselves relevant to what's going on between me and the person right in front of me. And maybe all of these things don't need to be here. So, how do I discuss what's actually going on, or even really how do I sit and like narrow down what's actually what's going on for me from a feeling perspective and not from a narrative perspective? That way my partner can understand what's going on for me right now. And I think, and that again being something I learned from coaching school, being able to sit with the actual feeling and name the feeling really helped to focus the rest of the conversation from that point forward to say, okay, like I said on a few lives ago, this is how I'm feeling. What would I like to happen as a result of this feeling? Shout out to Cancer transits. And that's my part of how to navigate a relational experience is to one, take the feeling itself seriously, acknowledge it, and then give it a name, even if the name is not exactly what I would like for it to be, or even if the name is not 100% the truth of what it actually is, it's a starting place. And because the person I'm seeing is so kind and caring and considerate, she was curious and wanted to know more about how I was feeling instead of turning it into a larger thing. Even though she wanted to, she's having her own experience and spiraling in her own ways that I would later understand. But a lot of times, just either of us would ask the other person more about what's going on for you. What are you feeling? What is the experience that you're having? And then both of us do a pretty good job of explaining like where that comes from or why it's coming up or what of the situation kind of made that happen. But a lot of what allowed that to happen is slowing down. Like, I don't know about y'all, I'm definitely the type of person who wants to fix it quickly, who wants to move past it quickly, who doesn't want to sit in the discomfort of the feeling. But there were a lot of times that we both just had to sit and like just be uncomfortable with each other and like let the discomfort take up space in the room. And then to just move slow enough with that and to have enough sense of curiosity about the feeling itself, and I don't know, kind of go from there. So, where am I trying to go with all this? So, when we talk about like expectation with Leo and Aquarius, I think it can feel embarrassing or humiliating to have feelings that you don't fully understand or that you've never really been allowed or have allowed those feelings to take up space in a relationship and be witnessed by somebody else. Um, I think it can be embarrassing or humiliating to be seen in your emotional distress sometimes if the expectation is always that you have it together or that you're poised or that you are whoever you are, like whatever idea or image you have of yourself in your mind. For me, as someone who does see clients specifically for relationship issues or, as an astrologer or whatever, like putting myself in this role as healer, I have definitely put so much pressure on myself my entire life to be the one who has all the answers and who knows what to do and can help really the other person through their stuff and just kind of leave mine cluttered in a closet somewhere in the recesses of my mind and not actually deal with it. And, that led to me not receiving the actual care and empathy that I deserved in those moments. And you could say that maybe I thought that I didn't deserve it or that I didn't need it because I made it this far without it. And so maybe the other person deserves and needs that empathy more than I do. Or I don't know, just a decentering of self that would happen um almost immediately. Like in the same way that there's a freeze response, there is also this kind of like, okay, well, your problems are bigger than mine. So let's deal with yours first. I think a lot of that is like the Capricorn kind of cardinal way of doing things and just a Saturn way of doing things. Like putting out somebody else's emotional fire felt like me regaining control of the situation. So if the other person's feelings were bigger than mine, their feelings were the priority and mine were just kind of like, because I'm already dissociated and detached from them in the first place. When Madison talked about like you being the thing that gets dropped off, like, yeah, I am the thing that got dropped off because I dropped myself off. I was like, all right, well, look, we can deal with our stuff later on our own. We'll process it in 2 to 3 business days and we'll circle back to it. But if the other person's feelings are bigger than mine, I'm gonna just leave mine where they at and deal with them first. And what was really cool about this last week is that I think my partner realized because of our friendship happening first and me kind of describing a lot of the ways that I've moved through relationship, she knew and remembered that like, oh, I know that for you, you have a tendency to feel like you have to manage other people's feelings first, or that it's hard for you to speak up for yourself. And so, even though my initial reaction was to kind of like spiral and make it about me, like, I don't want to discourage you from being able to speak up. So I apologize for that. I want to know more about how you're feeling or whatever. And she had the courage to just sit with her own discomfort of me being really honest and kind of holding up a mirror to her. That was unreal for me. And it's amazing how that also kind of made me feel a little bit like guilty at times too, because I'm like, oh no, like I'm making you have to like sit with all these uncomfortable feelings. But like she's strong enough to do that. I had to trust that she was strong enough to do that. And she had to trust that I was strong enough to do that for myself too. And I don't know. So that's just like, there are so many things I think that happen in relationships that are unspoken, that are really potent, like just content to work with, that I think because we can be such a problem solving society that we don't take the time to really feel into an experience with someone else. We kind of just like, we stay up here in the logical, the rational, the intellectual to say, okay, here's a problem. This is how to fix it. Boom, move on. And there's not really much attention or time spent with the actual emotions of the situation that sometimes just need to be acknowledged and just need to take up a little bit of space. So I bring all of that into the conversation to talk about like the relationship between Pisces and Aquarius, where Aquarius is in the 12th house from Pisces. Like those two things are not congruent with each other. They don't really know how to understand each other, but they also have such a close relationship that you kind of have to do one to get to the next. And I think for Pisces, having Saturn in Pisces during an Aquarius eclipse shows this relationship between us being one big nervous system and acknowledging the fact that we have an impact on each other, whether we want to or not, and just the reality of that. I don't know. So the next thing I wanted to introduce was a post that I literally saw minutes before I came on here that gave me all the language for this relationship between Pisces and Aquarius that I was struggling to find words for. And if you want to read along with me, I did just post it on my I posted the story on my Mixed Mercury story. And it's from Ailey Jolie. I know nothing about this creator, so I'm just taking the post. If you know something about this creator, I don't, but I opened Instagram up to a post called "The Adaptation That We Don't Talk About Enough: Dissociation as Devotion." I was like, today, um, today, right in front of my Aquarius eclipse, and then the sub caption below it says, "They're not lying. They've simply learned not to feel what it would be dangerous to know." So I'm gonna read the first couple of pages to this because I just feel like if somebody else said it, they could probably say it better than I could, and then we'll reflect, and then I'll pull some cards. Um, so the first page says, as a somatic psychologist, I've sat with people who insist that they are not in pain while their bodies tell a different story. They tell me they're fine, but their breath is shallow, their shoulders hover near their ears, their hands tremble imperceptibly when describing the last time they were dismissed, blamed, or belittled by someone that they loved. They're not lying. They've simply learned not to feel what it would be dangerous to know. The body is not waiting for proof. It responds to pattern, not narrative. It responds to tone, not text. It responds to threat, even when that threat is cloaked in love. This is called neuroception, the nervous system's constant subconscious scanning for cues of safety or danger in the environment. Unlike perception, which is conscious, neuroception doesn't wait for logic. It acts on sensation, posture, and pitch. In harmful relational dynamics, this is what happens first. The body tenses, the breath shortens, and the gut tightens, long before the mind can form the words, "This is not okay." This dissonance between body and story is often the first clue. But here's where it becomes more complicated. When attachment is on the line, when the nervous system perceives that love, safety, or connection could be lost, the body chooses survival over truth. And that's when we begin to gaslight ourselves. In somatic psychotherapy, we often describe dissociation as a trauma response, but it's more than that. It's also a relational strategy. Dissociation is not always a dramatic freeze. Often, it is subtle, strategic, and deeply relational. I've worked with countless clients who arrive disconnected from their own pain, not because they're detached, but because they've become exquisitely attuned to somebody else's. They've learned to track every mood, every pause, every shift in a partner's face. They've learned to silence the discomfort in their own bodies so they don't overreact. They've learned that staying regulated for someone else is the only way to stay connected. Hello? This is adaptive dissociation, and it's brilliant, if not heartbreaking. It is the fawn response, a lesser discussed trauma pattern that blends appeasement with self erasure. It is the child who learned to be pleasing, calm, low need, agreeable in order to stay safe. And it is the adult who still disappears into the needs of others, believing that love must be earned through performance. These clients don't present as chaotic, they present as composed, competent, overly understanding, but underneath, their bodies tell a different truth. Shallow breath, pelvic tension, chronic fatigue, shut down digestion, and often no memory of what they wanted in the first place. I see y'all in the chat. It's the client who says, I only remember the good times, even as their body flinches, recalling them. It's the moment a person's voice softens, their story flattens, their gaze drifts, because to feel would threaten the very attachment they still long to preserve. This isn't dissociation as dysfunction. This is dissociation as loyalty, as love, as the only available path to belonging when boundaries weren't allowed. Gaslighting from another erodes our trust in reality. Gaslighting from ourselves erodes our trust in our body. But why do we do it? Because when we're wired for insecure attachment, or when we've shown up in unpredictable emotional climates, our nervous system learns that connection requires contortion, that love is conditional, that feeling too much might make us too much. We become fluent in self-doubt because certainty has never felt safe. We confuse vigilance with love. We start to believe that if we feel hurt, we must have misunderstood. God, the child. Oh my God. I didn't get this far in the post. Goddamn. To be psychic. We start to believe that if we feel hurt, we must have misunderstood. The child who internalized, it must be me, becomes the adult who rationalizes red flags into context, who narrates harm as a communication breakdown, who bends towards the person causing the pain rather than listening to the signal within. As a clinician, bye Laura. Thank you for being here. You'll be here on the recording for sure. As a clinician, I've seen this over and over. Clients defend the people who harm them with compassion so fierce it eclipses their own pain. They didn't mean to. They're under stress. It's just the way they are. I probably made them feel that way. It's not denial. It's a learned form of intimacy. In depth-oriented work, we might say that these are unconscious contracts and agreements made early in life to trade parts of the self in exchange for belonging. The contract might sound like, if I don't make waves, I won't be abandoned. Or, if I can understand their pain, I'll be safe from mine. These aren't conscious thoughts. They live in the fascia, in the breath, in the felt instinct to override discomfort for the sake of keeping the peace. When the story we tell ourselves doesn't match the truth of our body, we begin to split, not visibly, but quietly. One part of us carries the fear, another part tells us to be grateful, one part aches to leave, and another reminds us just how much we'd miss them. In somatic terms, we become fragmented, nervous system responses firing in multiple directions at once, unable to settle. And this chronic inner conflict isn't just confusing, it's exhausting. And often, that exhaustion becomes the tipping point. When we finally leave, it's not because we're sure, it's because we're too tired to keep pretending. Healing does not begin with certainty. It begins with permission to feel, to grieve, to remember, to believe the body even when the mind still wants to argue. And the good news is, your body never stopped telling the truth. Even when you silenced it, even when you blamed it, even when you abandoned it to survive, it waited. Fuck. This is why I go on and on about how somatic healing and embodiment work is not about regulating your feelings or nervous systems. Somatics is about building the capacity to stay present with whatever is happening inside you, around you, and how they influence one another. Somatic is about recognizing the tightness in your throat as a boundary, or the knot in your stomach as a signal, the silence after a conversation as a rupture and not a coincidence. It's learning to listen to what your body says before your mind edits it. Because what happens with time and what makes somatics as laboratory, healing, and amazing is that the presence that you have in your body becomes protection. Not the kind built from armor, but from attunement with yourself. When you know what your body feels like in safety, you begin to notice when it's missing. You stop rationalizing the ache. You stop abandoning the flutter in your chest or the dread in your gut. You stop calling this disconnection love. And this is how we leave relationships, situations, places, and anything that harms us. Not always in certainty, but in clarity. I could keep going. Oh, I'm gonna keep going. Because once you've rebuilt the relationship with your body, once you've remembered what love and care feels like, staying in places that harm you becomes unbearable, and entering them becomes unthinkable. Your body won't let you. But here's the part we often miss. We don't do this alone. When trauma happens in relationship, healing must too. That isn't a subtle plug for therapy, it's simply the truth. And healing doesn't have to happen in therapy either. Here's why. From the moment we're born, our nervous systems develop in response to the people around us. Through every gaze, touch, and tone of voice, we learn whether the world is safe or not. Our brains are wired with mirror neurons, which means that we don't just observe the emotions of others, we feel them. Safety is contagious, but so is shame. And this is why presence matters. When we sit with someone who is grounded, compassionate, and attuned, our bodies begin to borrow their regulation. It's not performance, it's biology. We call this co-regulation, the nervous system's ability to come into balance through connection. If trauma was a moment when your body learned that it had to face the world alone, then healing becomes the moment that you realize you don't have to. And while therapy can offer that, so can a friend who holds eye contact without flinching, a partner who doesn't punish your boundaries, and a community who believes your story. The body learns safety through repetition, not through explanation, but through experience. And so, even before we fully believe that we're worthy of love, we begin to feel it in ourselves because someone else's calm is making it safer to stay inside our own skin. Sometimes the body doesn't remember how to trust until someone offers you the safety to do so. A friend who doesn't flinch when you cry, a therapist who mirrors your worth, a partner who honors your boundaries, a stranger who offers unexpected kindness on the street. These are not just gestures of kindness and care, they are nervous system offerings. Proof that presence can be healing, that someone else's groundedness can help you find your own. And over time, this is how we return to the body. Not all at once, but breath by breath, through the quiet accumulation of co regulated moments. Because embodiment is not just a personal practice, it is a relational one. To feel again, to choose again, to believe ourselves enough, to not abandon that knowing that lives beneath the skin. This is the return to somatic truth, to the body as compass, to the body as protector, to the quiet, grounded wisdom that whispers that safety if love and love is safety. And when you believe that, not just in theory, but in your nervous system, you stop confusing what you've been taught love is what love actually feels like. You stop performing it and you start receiving it. Not because you tried harder, but because you finally listened to the voice within that whispered, you never had to try for love. You are love. Damn. So if you just joined, that was from Ailey Jolie on Instagram. I posted that to my Mixed Mercury story. So if you want to bookmark that, I think you should, because what the fuck? Now, what's wild to me is that, I shared everything I just shared with no plan. And like I said, minutes before I came on live, I saw that post and I only read the first couple of pages and thought, I'm only going to read the first couple of pages. And then getting on here live and reading that out loud to y'all and hearing so much of what I just said reflected in that post is like an eclipse moment on its own. So I'm just kind of processing that for a moment. I feel warm. But you know what's so cool is that, like, I'm going through all of this stuff with this new partner and we're having all of these conversations and doing all of this really potent work. And there was a moment where we were sitting on my couch on Friday, just talking through things. And there was a point in the conversation where we were talking about worthiness, something that both of us struggle with. And I was talking about how, as a person with Leo placements, as a person who has kind of served my community in so many different like healer positions, right? And that being something that I have chosen in this life. Um, that I think a lot of my Saturn return and just a lot of my life experiences have made me have to accept that I am not normal. And by normal, I just mean like feels weird to say and own in front of people on my channel, but that I'm having to accept and step into the fact that I am different. Like I am exceptional in a lot of ways, and that I am not exactly meant to just live this kind of casual, straightforward life. And because of that, I am, that eighth houser that goes through great suffering, but then comes out with so much wisdom and insight that I don't even know what to do with or fully understand until I understand it. And that all of these things have led to this sense of people that I've dated in the past feeling unworthy or feeling intimidated or feeling like maybe I'm just too much for them or that they're not enough for me. And whether I believed that was true or not, which most of the time I didn't believe that was true, that was something that kind of existed in the relationship that had me up here on this pedestal that I didn't want to be on, and them always feeling like they were beneath me somehow. And some of that comes from me always performing this competence and this knowingness and this confidence and whatever else, while also being a little bit critical at times of them. Um, but in reality, I think it is just like a testament to how much I take my work seriously and try to like actually live it out. And I think that just makes me realize that, okay, that might make being in a relationship with me feel intimidating. And we were talking about that, and she admitted that, she's also felt that at times leading up to it and almost bought into it. But what made the difference for her was that if I believed that she was good enough for me, then she should be allowed to believe that she's good enough for me too. And like, to hear somebody say that to me, just like gave me a sense of like peace and internal rest that I don't know that I've ever felt. Cause that's like all I've ever wanted was to be believed that a partner that I'm choosing is not like a wrong choice. But if the other person is constantly telling me that they don't feel like they're the right choice, then why would I believe that? So, um, that also helped me accept the ways that I've also felt like I wasn't good enough, or that I was too much, or that I had too many things that I was bringing into this dynamic. Because in that moment, we both just kind of accepted that, like, hey, I'm willing to help you hold your stuff. And she's always been like, I will help you carry all of that shit that I know that you're carrying and not sharing with me. Because of course I entered the relationship as a person who like will hold everybody else's bags. But who's helping me hold my bags that are packed in the closet in the back? And it's a practice. I think the point of a lot of this mutable stuff, whenever we're talking about Jupiter and we're talking about Mercury and we're talking about certainty and discernment and all of these different things, it's like it's never about knowing exactly what's going to happen next or in the future, or knowing and anticipating a specific outcome. I mean, I think we do that naturally as people because we're designed that way. Um, but we learn through practice, and we learn through repetition, and we learn through having new experiences and trusting that the next new experience that we have will will figure out how to move through it. We'll learn from the last experience that we have and take those lessons into the next experience that we have, because this is all of our first time that we know of consciously on this earth. And if we go full circle and we come back to the nodes, like it's not our first time on this earth. We probably, a lot of us, I know I've been here many, many times. And that's probably why I present the way that I do. I've been here many, many times, and the wisdom and the knowledge of our ancestors also lives with us too. You can think about that spiritually, or you can think of it as evolution, but whatever it is, like we have so much intrinsic wisdom that we can only access through experience itself. And so I feel like the other way that we gain wisdom is through relationship, and like tapping into what other people know and have experienced in their own lives and in their own bodies and their own ancestry and their own karmic passages through this lifetime. It's like the other benefit of being vulnerable and sharing these things in relationship. Hi, Eric. Is to let somebody else see your wisdom, or see your pain, even your shame, your embarrassment, whatever it is, your joy, your talent, whatever it is, as wisdom and insight that you can also get something from. And the repetition of doing that with somebody else is healing. This is why I love working in peer support. Exactly. The discernment and certainty is learned along the way. And the vulnerability in not knowing is also the catalyst for learning. Hmm. So that brings me to my last part of the story. I thought I was gonna pull cards today, but I don't know. I'm feeling like maybe I don't need to. I might do a quick 2 card just to see what they have to say. But the last part of the story is yesterday I went for a bike ride out by the lake, as I like to do, on a microdose very early in the morning. I got there probably about 7:45 and I was already high. But on the ride, I on when I bike on a microdose, I always get the simplest but most profound revelations, and then I share them with other people. I'm like, that sounds so obvious, but I'm gonna say it anyway. So the first part of the ride, um, like literally the first 2 minutes, 2, 3 minutes of the ride, I have this little bit of a climb over some rocks and then a little bit more of a climb over some more rocks. And the first little section, I've never been able to just clean it. I always have to get off and walk. And this time I approached it and I was thinking in my mind ahead of time, like, okay, I'm going to just pedal up and go through it. And I'm going to crush it this time. And I got up about halfway through it and slowed down, but I didn't get off my bike. And I was like, ooh, okay, stay up. And usually what I say to myself is XP, 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 because I realize it's a moment where I'm gaining expert points or experience points, like when you play video games. And just kind of like had this moment of, okay, like, and got into my strategic brain instead of my brain that wants to rush through, and was like, okay, this is what we need to do. Doop, 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 and made it up. And I was like, wow, I always rush up the climbs because, mountain biking is fun when you go fast. And for some reason in my mind, I think I need to be going fast up the climbs. But the whole point of the climb is the journey. Thank you, Miley Cyrus. No, but the whole point of the climb is that it's slower and that it takes a little bit more focus, but it takes a little bit more technical skill, and that it's slower. And a thing that we say a lot in mountain biking is that you earn the descents because the descents is where all the fun is. But the climb, the treacherous, exhausting climb, is where you earn the fun on the other side. It's the suffering before the joy, right? But I always try to rush through the climb because I feel like it's a statement about me if I'm able to climb and move fast, right? Like, we talk about mountain bikes as being efficient climbers, and in my mind, I think that should just mean that they climb fast. And in some cases, like, yes, an efficient climber is going to be fast, but it's not fast because you're overexerting yourself. It's fast because you're able to tackle the obstacle in front of you in a way that is smooth and doesn't require so much extra energy. So why am I putting in so much extra energy to breeze past this challenging moment when the point is to accept the challenge for what it is and move through it in a way that doesn't require me to overexert myself? So I don't know. Accepting that efficient didn't mean fast meant that I could relax into the climb. And relaxing into the climb meant that I didn't have to get off the bike. It meant that I didn't have to overexert, didn't have to overestimate. I didn't have to stop and just not do it at all. It just meant I needed to slow down. So I was like, okay, noted that. And then the next realization that I had came a little bit later after I had accepted that sometimes you just got to sit and spin on the climb. And that worked really well for me through the rest of the ride. I get to the top of the hill. I'm sitting at this lookout point and it started to rain. And then it started to really rain and it was like coming down. And in my mind, I was thinking, okay, well, guess the ride's over. Like, got to get out of the rain. And I was like, well, hold on. Because, my first thought is that, well, it's dangerous to ride in the wet in environments like the one that I was in because there's a lot of rocks and there's a lot of roots and they get very slippery when it's wet. They're great whenever it's dry, especially with the new tires that I have, but they are very slippery when wet. And in my mind, I'm thinking, I am not going to be able to make it down this hill in this wet, in this mud, without hurting myself. So I guess the ride's over. But then I was like, hold on. People who live in the Pacific Northwest, who bike in, whose videos I watch all the time, by the way, who bike in Washington or Oregon or um, in BC and Vancouver, in Canada, like they bike in the mud, in the wet, in the rain all the time because it's always raining up there. They don't just stop and leave. And sometimes they go out even knowing that it's raining. Lots of people in Europe do the same thing. So I was like, why, if I'm already out here, like, yes, normally I wouldn't choose to go out and ride in the rain. But because I'm already out here, I'm already wet, I have to get back to my car somehow. I'm just going to have to figure out a way to do it. And so I started doing it and I went over my first little section of super chunky, ridiculous rocks or whatever. And I thought, okay, same thing, full circle that I thought on the climb is that, yes, usually I would like to go downhill fast. But if I'm going to stay safe, I need to slow down. Maybe I can't do it moving fast without hurting myself, but I can do it if I slow down. Hello, wisdom from the beginning of the ride, creeping in at the end of the ride. And once I did that and I got through it the first time, I was like, you know what? Nobody ever got better at riding in the wet by only riding whenever it was dry. Challenge accepted. Again. And that made the rest of the ride feel so liberating because it was like, okay, yeah, maybe you're not supposed to ride in the rain. Maybe it is more dangerous. And also, like, I'm soaked. I can't see out of my glasses. I had to not use my glasses. Like, there are just so many things about like why this should feel wrong, but the fact that I was doing it anyway just felt so freeing. And I also felt a little bit like I was being baptized. Like it was like a spiritually healing moment to be in the rain and on my bike and in nature and nobody else was out there and it was just like nobody can tell me that this is wrong. Nobody can tell me that I shouldn't be doing this. Like nobody can tell me anything. And I feel like that is like the pinnacle of Aquarius and self-determination where you are just having the experience you're having and being self-led and walking with yourself and holding yourself through an experience with no idea of how it's going to turn out and just trusting yourself. Trusting all of the miles that I had put on my bike up to this moment, but also trusting everything that I'd witnessed from other people riding too, and knowing that I could do that for myself where I am in that moment and be fine. And what's funny about that is that I went into this weekend in this eclipse knowing that after the week that I had, I've been dealing with a lot of disorganized attachment stuff. And I knew that by microdosing on this ride, I would be I would be healing something attachment related. I just didn't know how. And that moment of saying, like, nobody ever got better at riding in the wet by riding in the dry or riding when it's dry, um, just kind of reminded me that you like it's so much of attachment is really about one, having the courage to try something new, and two, to let the experience be what it's be and know that you will figure it out somehow. And that you can only learn the skill and like heal attachment wounds by having that difficult experience. Like you have to let yourself have the discomfort and the panic and the spiraling and the humiliation and the embarrassment and the shame and the pain and the aches and all the feelings and the tension and all of like you have to let yourself have all of the feelings in order to resolve the attachment wound. Otherwise, you're always going to be avoiding or rushing through the climb or the bad weather. You never learn how to just ride the wave if you just always avoid it. So going into this weekend, like knowing that my new partner was going to be celebrating her anniversary with her boyfriend the next few days, I was like, less about her having a boyfriend of 9 years and more about me being like, oh, I'm going to be alone after we've been spending a lot of time together. And that's uncomfortable for me, but I'm going to be okay. And here I am being okay, having a new experience with a new person and telling the internet about it with no idea of how the relationship's going to turn out in the long run. But I feel safe. So I wanted to share personal experience as making myself into an archetype that hopefully you guys can relate to or see yourself in, and to not put me on a pedestal, but to use me as a mirror, your divine mirror, Sky Daddy. um to take these insights and do with them what makes sense for you, because that's what I'm here for. And yeah, that's the whole point of all of this for me. So maybe I don't pull cards. Maybe I just let that be what it is. I want to see what you guys said in the chat while I was reading. 'Cause I was reading for a long time. Ah, freeze is underappreciated in the fight or flight world. Okay, Scott Pilgrim. So true. The Seven Evil Exes. That's such a good movie. I remember seeing that movie and being like, so real. Maybe I'll watch it again. Communicating feelings is so tough. Love this breakdown. Thank you. Thank you. Slowing down has been the most needed lesson. The face that I'm making at sitting with feelings. True. Humiliation. Yeah. Ironically, wearing a mask has made it easier to speak up about my feelings. You know what? That's so true. Wow. No, you really ate with that. Because one of the things I've been saying about masking, as somebody who has always concealed their feelings, is that since wearing a mask, it's made me feel more exposed. And I haven't liked that, but you're right. The result of that has been that now I just have no choice but to talk about things because people already see me visually, see a visual cue of like, this guy has thoughts and feelings about things that I maybe don't understand or know about. And those who have actually wanted to know and be curious have asked, and we've talked about it. And that has helped with just general vulnerability. So I see you guys were definitely resonating with the post. Q, absent-mindedly holding my breath. Yes. For me, it's always been, like I said, that constriction in my throat, but this just like knotted, clenched feeling in my gut. Like I'm always clenching my gut, and not in a way of like sucking in, but just like clenching my gut. And it's led to IBS real bad. IBS baddie on my sixth house, eighth house girly stand up. Um, IBS symptoms, disrupted appetite, like just general holding tension in my body. Yes, me as well. Adaptive dissociation and fawning. This is too much. That was my whole 2024. So real, so true. Real tears from the gallery. Yes. Just describing my childhood. I need a joint after this. Honestly, truly. Not my damn fascia. Yeah. Yes. I was getting massages regularly, and the first few minutes of just, like, being touched would make me so aware of how much tension I was holding in my body in places that I hadn't even considered. Like, "Yo, if I don't make waves, I won't be abandoned." So true. Hypermobile, neurodivergent, poorly parented children stand up painfully. Ah! Ah! So true, so real. That is beautifully written. I need to find this content creator. Yes, post is on my page. Not through explanation, but experience. My Gemini self needed that. Also, that, yes. You never had to try for love. Yeah, yeah. Hey, Desiree. Yes, you came in during that shit. This is why I love working in peer support. I know, I kinda wanna find some, like, group therapy stuff because even though I'm healing personal relationship stuff, I still struggle in communal groups and being authentic in groups versus performing authenticity in groups. Not to tell tell 'em myself, but that was also my coaching school revelation was like, "I'm still performing. Can't turn it off," which is fine. Sometimes it's okay to perform, but, you know, if my personal goal is to be more vulnerable, gotta practice. This is a bar from my ma. Oh, my Mars and Gemini. So true. The get it over with of it all, working on that myself. Slowing down and accepting that this is a challenge. Yes. I'm blaming capitalism for doing this to us. Unnecessary anxiety we be putting on ourselves. 1000% agree. Everything is fast and quick and go hard and do it all. Put in overtime, this and that. No, slow down. You are so much more efficient when you slow down. The seesawing between certainty and uncertainty is so important and uncomfortable. I hate love it. Absolutely. Disrupted appetite as hell. I have a breathing routine I use to loosen up because child breathing is so important. Does anybody want to take just like 5 breaths with me real quick? If you're still on the stream, let's do that. Sit comfortably or lay down comfortably and put your hands on your belly, like just below your ribs, if you can, where your diaphragm would be, and like take a deep breath into your stomach first and then let your lungs fill up. I know that sounds weird because it's your lungs anyway, but you'll feel it when you do it. And just feel the tension release from your gut. And I do in through my nose, out through my mouth, longer exhales out through your mouth. And then return to your normal breath. And just feel what your body feels like. And as you feel what your body feels like, notice what thoughts start coming up in your head. Don't feed the thoughts, just notice. I started digesting. And we're not getting into a full meditation right now because you didn't ask for that or consent to that yet. But um, anytime you notice yourself too much in your head or doom scrolling a lot, see if you can give yourself like a 5-second timeout or a 60-second timeout to take 5 deep breaths and then return to your normal breath and feel what your body feels like and notice your thoughts. And then if you get to that place where your mind clears out a little bit more and you notice a softer voice enter the chat, and that softer voice isn't beating you up or making you feel bad about yourself, but has this compassionate tone to it, even if it is firm, that might just be your intuition, if you ever wondered who that is. But if it's a voice that just feels like someone else's, that's not your intuition. If you're repeating the words that someone else has always said to you, that's not your intuition. To me, sometimes my intuition, and I'm talking about intuition because Saturn is in Pisces and this is a Saturn ruled eclipse, is that like sometimes in my intuition is like the soft voice that says the things like, no one ever got good at riding in the wet by always riding when it's dry, or the challenges in the climb or whatever. But sometimes it's a voice that says, wow, you were holding so much tension. Or, wow, it was really loud inside your head just now. It's just kind of like a noticing voice. And then it'll say something like, you really didn't deserve that. Or, you can be so hard on yourself. Or, maybe it's okay that you feel this way. Or, I don't know. It just has this kind of like affirming, validating tone or message that makes me soften and feel like a sense of clarity or inner peace, internal peace. So I tend to think that that's intuition. It comes up only whenever you've allowed the dust of your own mental clutter to settle. And sometimes your inner voice does say things like, maybe you didn't have to do all that. And it's not shaming, but it's just like, yeah, maybe that wasn't totally necessary the way that you reacted, but that is how you reacted and there's wisdom in that. I don't know. You figure out what it is for you. But as you're doing your feeling and grounding and co-regulating and whatever else, it really does start within first. But you got to give yourself that space to feel it in the first place. I'm done. No cards again. You know, am into this whole like trusting myself thing. So I thought because I had nothing prepared, I would want to pull cards, but I feel like I've said everything I need to say, and the cards would just be overkill. So go read the cards that Madison pulled on their Patreon page because that's what it's there for. I'll let her do the tarot and I will be Saturn like I always am. So thank y'all so much for joining me today and for listening and letting me share and center myself in a conversation. Thank you for participating in whatever ways you participated on the other side of the screen. And please like the video if you haven't already. Subscribe to my channel so you know whenever I go live. I go live every Sunday at 12 p.m. Central. And one of these days I will write something for my Patreon. I dropped the ball again, but I thank you. Big shout out to all of the people who do support me and who drop a couple coins in my business account every month. Plenty of spaces open for readings as well if you'd like to sit down with me and talk about your north and south node or how these eclipses been hitting for you. So I would love to chat with you. I will see y'all next week. Oh yeah, and heads up, Mars enters Libra this weekend. We also have a Mercury Sun conjunction in Leo, and then I think next Sunday Venus will enter Leo. So we'll go through much of the week without any changes, and then by the time I see you next, we will be in a new season. So until then, besties, cue outro music. Bye.